Today, Jonathan Taylor requested, finally, formally, I guess, was allowed to request a trade. And obviously over contract issues. So that's going to be the big thing, is the team that trades for him is not only going to have to give up assets, but give him an extension. And it's just an odd point right now for Jonathan Taylor. Like, I feel like he's does not have the advantage here. I mean, he might, but it's tough because it's training camp right now, and running back, as we know, is been devalued in recent years. And as of right now, like, not a lot of teams out there are glaringly needing a running back. And on top of that, going to be able to give an extension right away. So I feel like that limits his suitors. But I want to know your thoughts on the situation, and maybe if you had any ideas of any destinations you think that would be an ideal fit for him.
Yeah, just initial thoughts immediately was it's going to be hard, I think, to find a team, because it's not only, first off, they said they were looking for a first-round pick, which is like kind of hard to come by. Even McCaffrey didn't get a first-round pick. Now, they did say they're also willing to lower the price to other picks that they find equivalent of a first-round pick. That's kind of subjective, I guess. So behind closed doors, maybe they have a certain asking price of what that means, second and third, or, I don't know. But yeah, that's a tough price. Now, we did see the Niners were willing to pay that price, but not only are you having to pay the price to get him, then you have to pay him. That's the other thing. So it's almost like, all right, well, how much, like what kind of contract is he looking for? Are we willing to pay that contract? So are we willing to give up the picks? Are we willing to devote the salary cap? And then at that point, it's like, okay, and this is the unfortunate reality of running backs, but how many years do we think he has left? So it's like a team that kind of wants to win now. Like, well, not necessarily immediately now, because Jonathan Taylor's only really had, a short amount of time in the league. And even his first year, he was splitting snaps with multiple other backs. So he's really only had like the last 2 years as the guy. But even then, I mean, you give him 5 years? Before, and that may be generous. You never know. But 5 years at most. So you kind of got to capitalize. So that eliminates some other teams. So I think his options are limited. I understand why he's doing what he's doing. I think that it's like, in his eyes, it's probably a little bit bigger than him, considering that he responded to that one viral tweet by, I think it was Matt Miller, like the guy on Twitter who does like scouting and fantasy type stuff. But he tweeted something about how, and Saquon responded to it, Jonathan Taylor responded, multiple people responded to it, about how the formula in this day with the NFL is draft a running back. If they're really good, you franchise tag them, and then after that, you just draft another one. And all the running backs, got up in arms about it. And so I think he's doing it to try and help the general running back market, and then also obviously get himself as much money as possible. But I just think it's going to be tough to find teams. So now I have thought about this a little bit as a Jonathan Taylor dynasty owner, in the league that we just started up recently. I've thought about this quite a bit. The one team that makes the most sense to me, which I'll get your thoughts on this one like immediately after, instead of, and then we'll talk about some other teams after, is the Miami Dolphins. Just in terms of like, they have the pieces that seems like they're ready to win now. They have some of their key pieces like a Tua, a Jalen Waddle, still as of right now on rookie contracts. It's the coach McDaniels comes from the Shanahan scheme where they rely very much on the running back, and we just saw the Niners were willing to go get McCaffrey, so maybe McDaniels is willing to do the same. Although they did draft Devin Akane, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Achane. They drafted him, so I don't know how they feel about the running back room, but that was like the one team that I was like, okay, I could see them doing that. What do you think about the potential Dolphins fit?
Yeah, that's honestly the best and only real like glaring fit that popped out to me as well. And obviously there's already a report too via the Miami Herald that like the Dolphins are expected to explore, a trade with him since they lost down Dalvin Cook. And yeah, you mentioned also Devin Akane, or however you pronounce his name. He recently got injured in the most recent preseason game. Yeah. Expected to miss time with a shoulder injury, so becomes more of an issue.
Raheem Mostert has missed time in the past too, so it's not like this is the most healthy running back room.
Yeah, and like man, he would be. I know that it wouldn't be the best fit, like running wise. Their O line's probably the main question, but we've seen Jonathan Taylor work, and especially with that passing offense, it would be very dangerous. And he can be involved in the passing game too. He's shown that as well. So that's the only real glaring one, because I ran through all the teams in my head. I don't think they trade. It's Jim Irsay. He's not going to trade him to any of the teams within the division because they do not want to see him twice a year. I feel like they're definitely going to try to trade him to the NFC, but like I already ran through most of the teams in my head in the NFC. Like probably no one in it in your division, the NFC East, except for maybe the Commanders. But once again, they just drafted Brian Robinson a couple of years ago. Still have Antonio Gibson. I know like there's gonna be some crazy Eagles fans that say the Eagles, but they literally just traded for DeAndre Swift to have a stable. And I'm not even sure. Once you mentioned contract wise, it's just a tough fit to find anywhere that willing to pay that. And I expect Jonathan Taylor's going to want to go to a contender, or at least a team that has a chance. He's not going to go to, I'm just throwing out there, Arizona. Arizona, they're rebuilding, and same with Houston. So, it really limits, I guess, the available teams interested. But, you never know. Maybe, like I said, maybe a random team swoops. I thought maybe the Rams, once again, like, does Jonathan Taylor want to go there? And the Rams have already tried this whole top-heavy ordeal, right, and they already have limited assets. So like Miami's the only team that really jumped out to me that can make this move, because the rest of the roster is pretty much intact, really well done, and they can afford to pay that price.
Yeah, I think for other teams too that I was thinking of, like in the NFC, it just becomes so tough because a lot of these teams either already have running backs that they're like comfortable with, or have clearly made a stance of like, we're not willing to pay one. Like, for example, the Cowboys, they already have Pollard, but also they just let Zeke walk after the big contract. They're not going to pay for one. The Panthers, they just traded McCaffrey. Like, I don't think they're going to go out and go use those picks they got for McCaffrey to then go get another running back. Falcons have Bijan. The Lions got Jahmyr Gibbs. The Packers have 2 running backs. The Vikings just made it clear they were not willing to pay Dalvin Cook. The Giants are already dealing with Saquon Barkley. Like, the list goes on and on with all these teams. Like you said, the only teams that really could potentially even explore that would be like Washington, the Rams, but I don't think the Rams even really would have the picks, because like their just roster is so thin. There's no way that they would do that again, because Jonathan Taylor's not the piece that puts them over the edge.
Would you throw the Bears in there? Just out of curiosity, because I thought about the Bears, but like, does it fit their window? And they already have a crowded running back room with Foreman. Yeah. And
so the Bears were actually one I was going to potentially mention, just because I don't know how they personally feel, but they've shown the willingness to be aggressive trading for DJ Moore. So I think that they really believe in Justin Fields. And although I don't think personally that Jonathan Taylor is the player that would put them over the edge, considering that like Justin Fields is a running quarterback, so you're already going to get some running production from him. I don't think that you really need an elite level running back to pair with a quarterback like that. I mean, look at the Eagles, like you just talked about. Like, they just let Miles Sanders walk, and then they go trade for DeAndre Swift, who's kind of a little undervalued at this point. Like, they didn't even really have to give up a ton. And the Eagles have always kind of cycled with running backs around Jalen Hurts. Like, they've always had Sanders, but there was always like a stable. I think back to like with the Ravens, for example. I mean, they could be maybe a team in the mix here, but once again, another team that like they're not paying running backs big money around Lamar. Most of these teams with running quarterbacks don't seem to really go get an elite level running back, because I don't know. It just seems a little redundant, I guess, which is my hesitation with the Bears. Like, if I'm the Bears, I'm thinking, let's improve the offensive line. Let's get another receiver. Let's get some more defense. The running back feels like the least of my worries. Like you said, they already have Herbert. They have Foreman. They just drafted Roshan Johnson. Although none of those guys are Jonathan Taylor, their production combined with Fields will give you an elite level running attack as long as the offensive line can block, right? So, I don't know. The AFC gets tough too, because like you said, the division I think is ruled out. There's certain teams like Cleveland with Chubb, or like some of these teams kind of get ruled out. The Broncos, the Raiders, because they're dealing with Jacobs. The Chargers are not trying to pay Eckler right now. It's just there's so many teams like that just kind of stack up. The Steelers already have Najee. The Titans already have Derrick Henry. That it just seems like his options are very limited. I really I don't know what team. I mean, like I have the one crazy one that I've seen thrown out there would be the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't think they would do that, but I've seen some people throw that out there, and if they did, I mean, as a fantasy owner of Jonathan Taylor, I'd be very happy, but it would be very scary.
Yeah, that thought popped in my head also, but then I remember too. Right now, they are in their own contract negotiation kind of standoff with Chris Jones,
right.
So they're already, and we've you know, I especially probably made the joke like the Chiefs they should be out of cash by now at this point,
and so, also
like they've already paid Mahomes all that money and Kelsey and Jones.
Both their Super Bowls were with undrafted running backs. Like, was it Damian Williams was the first year they won? He was the starting running back at that point. Williams, yeah. And then, you know, this year that with Pacheco, which he was not undrafted. He was what, 6th, 7th round, I think? Or was he undrafted?
7th round, but late round.
I mean, like, these are not high value running backs that they're getting come draft time, and they're winning Super Bowls with these guys. They went out and tried to spend a big price tag on Clyde Edwards-Helaire with a first round pick. And I mean, he's a fine player, but he's not worth the first round pick looking back on it. So that philosophically, it just seems like the Chiefs do not value the running back that much that they would go out and trade for Jonathan Taylor. So I think we're just back to square one all of a sudden, where it's like, all right, there's like a few teams, the Dolphins, the Bears. I don't know. Maybe if there's some AFC team out there like the Ravens or Bills or somebody who really aren't satisfied with the running backs in-house, then maybe they could, but it seems unlikely. I don't know. The options seem so limited.
Before we move on, I feel like personally in regards to the situation, I wouldn't be shocked if, and I hope this doesn't happen for you for your fantasy, but just an important thing to note, like if the Colts just hold on to him going into the season and they wait until the season progresses, because we know one of the reasons why the running back position has been devalued is because these guys, they're in a lot of collisions, and really the Colts just kind of wait out the season, wait for a team that maybe loses their running back, or, you know, that's in contention, but we just lost our star running back, or our running backs are underproducing. Like you mentioned, maybe the Bills, just as an example, off the top of my head, but it could be another team because we never know with injuries. But you know what I mean? Yeah. Like I just feel like that, unfortunately for Jonathan Taylor and Jonathan Taylor fantasy owners, I fear that that's going to be the situation. Is that not going to find a deal within? We're already going to the last week of preseason, so it's really tough. I just feel like, you know, it won't be until a month or two in right at trade deadline is when we'll finally see a deal made, because that's kind of when the timeline when, not that Caffrey requested trade, but that's when the Panthers moved him, was around trade deadline. Granted, you know, the Niners just kind of pounced on the opportunity, not that they needed him, but that's why I see it playing out.
And I will say, at least for me in fantasy, I like him on the Colts. Like, I think the situation, the offensive line, I think they will be better than last year. I think talent-wise, they underperformed heavily. And I don't know, call me a believer, but I think that Quentin Nelson hasn't just forgotten how to play football. Like, I think it was just a bad year. They had injuries. The QB situation wasn't pretty. Taylor was injured too. You know, the coaching staff, you know, was clearly at some point on the way out. There was a lot going on, so I think they'll bounce back. And then the fact that Anthony Richardson's there, yeah, I do think he'll like maybe vulture some touchdowns or something, but I still think they'd run heavy. So I'm fine with him if he stays in the Colts. Like, if he signs an extension, I'm totally cool with that. Now, one possibility.
Do you think he actually plays? Sorry, because like I fear, I just get this vibe because he's been so anti-Irsay that he's going to hold out. You know, because he's already been, you know, missing time. I know it's practice and training camp, preseason stuff. He's already been, you know, personal excuse for one day, ankle's a little iffy, you know. So that's what I more alluded to, is that he holds out and they eventually like both sides, because they don't want him to get injured, because then they can't trade him.
Yeah,
and it's a lose on both sides. So it's a tough quandary.
I think he would not play, which is the scary part, because I think in his, like, this isn't like the Le'Veon Bell situation where he's been franchise tagged. So he's pushing the cards out onto the table even earlier, where he's saying like, just like, it's time, I want to go. So I think that he would be willing to not play, because then if he, like, here's the scary part too, if he does play, is they could just franchise tag him. And so I think that would incentivize him even more, of like, I don't want to get hurt and I don't want them to tag me. So if I got to sit out this whole year, then that's what we do. The scary part there is, you know, we saw what happened with Le'Veon Bell, and the contract wasn't even as good. So I don't know. Honestly, the fact that they've even said that they're willing to let him explore trade at this point, considering that Irsay's initial stance was we will not trade him now or in October. That's what Irsay said. I think that shows that they've kind of figured out like, no, this is serious. Like, and so I honestly expect him to get traded. I'm gonna be real. Like, I'm
before the season.
Yeah, honestly, I think so. Call me crazy. I'm almost like 90% in the basket if he's going to be a Miami Dolphin. I think the fit just makes too much sense. It's really the only team. I think they're going to have some of the leverage in the trade negotiations. I don't think he's going to go for the McCaffrey price. I think maybe like a second and a late round pick, something like that. I could see that happening. But yeah, here's one scenario I wanted to throw out to you because I do think there's some teams that mentally we are ruling out that could maybe jump into the race. And these are the teams that already have a good running back that is aging. I'm talking the Bengals with Joe Mixon, the Titans with Derrick Henry, even the Giants with Saquon Barkley. I know these sound kind of ludicrous at first, but do you think there's any team like that that could be like, hey, if you guys are that desperate to get rid of Jonathan Taylor, we'll give you a pick and then we'll take Jonathan Taylor and then they're going to cut their guy. I don't know the ramifications of like cutting a Joe Mixon, but do you think that would be a potential possibility for those sort of teams? Not the Bengals specifically, but those kind of teams.
Well, I did think about the Bengals. I don't want to use them as an example because once again, we're not insiders, but theoretically, maybe they offer a second and Joe Mixon as kind of like, hey, here's your placeholder running back. We kind of swap positions. Mm-hmm. We obviously get the upgrade in Jonathan Taylor, but you get a solid running back in return that you have for at least another year or two. I forget his contract.
I'm looking at it now just because I wanted to look. I don't think they'd go the cut route because he has a dead cap at $10 million this year.
They just restructured. Yeah. I think that was over the offseason.
Yeah, the out is next year or after the season where he'd only have a $2.7 million dead cap. But he's got 2 years left. That's it. 2 years left.
So, I mean, I could see that, like, if the Bengals, and especially since Burrow's coming off that injury, maybe they want to, this is a way to kind of not put too much on his plate at the beginning of the season as he comes back from that, because he has missed valuable time, practice and such. And then just obviously had another whole nother dynamic to their team. And they did invest, in left tackle Orlando Brown. He's probably playing left side. So it could, I think I wouldn't rule out I'm with you. I wouldn't rule out the Bengals. Bengals could get kind of crazy and push all the chips because they have a pretty good roster. Otherwise, we just did the AFC North last week. Obviously some young pieces that, you want to see step into their roles and be better. But Bengals are the only one that really jump out to me. I thought maybe the Saints, but I'm like, oh no, because they're paying Kamara good money and he's suspended, so I'm not even sure if they can technically trade him I don't know, that whole ordeal. So, and once again, I'm not sure if the Colts really want. I don't know, but I like the Bengals. Like, I don't think that's such a crazy concept that the Bengals could swoop in as well.
Yeah,
with some sort of deal.
I looked at Derrick Henry's contract real quick. This is his last season, but he does have dead cap that carries over into the next 2 years, I guess, because of some restructuring they've done. So that makes it seem a little less likely that they would do it, considering they'd have to be paying Derrick Henry. I mean, it's like small. It's like $4.7 million next year and then $2.3 the year after. But that's just more money that you're allocating to the running back, and their timeline doesn't seem to really match up with Taylor. So I don't know. But I just wanted to throw that out there as another maybe potential possibility, just because with these kind of situations, like I didn't know if when the Niners did it, were we talking about the Niners as like a serious contender for McCaffrey? I know we had maybe mentioned that.
I think we just mentioned it was a great fit. We're like, man, this would be a great fit, but we know Kyle Shanahan, he loves to have kind of multiple backs and such. But so I don't think I have to go back and check sometime. But I don't think we thought of them as like number one, top contender. I think we had like the Bills. The Bills was like, the Bills are definitely sniffing around him. So like you mentioned, could potential sleeper, dark horses. Like the Bills could be, but it just they got brought in Damian Harris, as we mentioned, and Latavius Murray, and they're still figuring out James Cook. So I just feel like apparently a lot of cooks in that kitchen.
He's having a very good training camp so far. So
Yeah, so it feels like they're kind of going their own direction.
Right.
They're going with their guys. That's why I mentioned, like, it's just tough, the timing of all this, because it feels a few months ago, maybe some of these teams aren't so sure about the running back rooms, but now that everyone's out and they're still evaluating guys to cut and such, just odd timing,
right?
At least for Jonathan Taylor, at least. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds, especially fantasy wise, because I feel like a lot of fantasy owners, like I had a draft this past weekend. It was just a redraft league. I didn't like Jonathan Taylor was like available fourth, fifth round.
Mm-hmm. And
I think around fifth round, it was about to come back to me. I was like, man, do I pull the trigger on him? Luckily, someone else made the decision for me. But I'm very interested to see like the highs and lows of his ADP at least while this all plays out. Because it could get wild. And depending on where he goes, like I said, Miami could be a very good destination, but who knows?
And just one last added note before we move on. At least in the regards to will he potentially play, I will say he was at practice this past week. He wasn't playing. And then he left due to like an excused absence, but he was there for like a day or two. He wasn't like suited up at all, but he was there. So that could be a good sign that maybe he would play. I don't know, but I don't know.
I'm assuming he would. It's more of a hold in because remember the whole back issue thing.
Yeah.
The Colts try to say, "Oh, he's had back," and he's like, "I do not have a back injury."
Yeah,
can immediately shut that noise down. So. We'll see what happens here with Jonathan Taylor and the Colts, if they can find a deal before the season or if they'll have to wait till, during the season to make a deal. We'll have to see what goes down. I'm sure we'll hear contenders and such in regards to people that want to trade for him within a few weeks.